Around 2000 to 2007, I was a car salesman. Don't judge me. This was at a time when payment protection insurance, or PPI, was at its highest. I'm going to explain to you some of the tactics that were employed by the finance companies, some of the pressure that was put on us, and how we were actually taught to mis-sell those products to customers. And stick around to the end to find out why I was almost sacked for not offering a finance product. So payment protection insurance has been around for a long time. And around 2000 it became much more prominent. As a salesperson, we were sent on many courses to really enforce that we needed to sell payment protection insurance. And the commissions were huge. The incentives were massive. The finance companies were pushing. The salespeople were making lots of money, and the garages were rubbing their hands together. There was no real regulation of those products at the time. Now we have the FCA, but that didn't exist until this scandal all came about. So here were a couple of things that we were told to do to make sure the customer took out the insurance product. One of them was to quote them with their monthly payments and not even tell them that they'd got the insurance included in the repayments. The idea being that if the customer was happy with the £160 or £200 a month they had to pay, you didn't tell them, they didn't ask any questions, they signed the documents, which was all done manually at the time. Happy days. I remember selling a customer a car for £12,000 with full gold payment protection, and I think on that car, just on the finance product alone, I made £800 commission. That was before the sales commission. And I started to look at this and I thought, this isn't right. I could see people buying cars with this insurance product on it that really wasn't worth the paper it was written on. In fact, it would later turn out that a lot of people who tried to claim didn't get a penny back. In another finance meeting, a tactic was suggested that when you give the customer the quote for the finance, put your finger over the box that shows the insurance product cost. And when they come to sign the agreement, pass the paper over the table to them, put your finger over the box that shows how much they're paying in insurance, and say, could you sign there, please? That way they can't see the product, they sign the documents, you take it back, you fax it back to the finance company, which was how it used to be done. The customer never realises that they've got that product on there in the first place. So not only were they mis-selling a product in as much as it wasn't really worth the paper it was written on when you had to make a claim, for example, if you lost your job or you became ill, but they were also employing tactics to make sure that the customer wasn't fully aware of what they were buying. Now, by this point, I'm starting to get pretty fed up with this. I want to sleep at night and I'm not happy. And I'm deciding I think it's time I probably changed careers, because I could see how the industry was going and I didn't like it at all. Not only was PPI a thing, but personal contract plans, or PCP, was coming online, becoming much more prominent. Wasn't a big fan of that either. But the real crux of it was when the finance company decided to send a secret shopper down to the branch that I worked at. It was 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. The week before, the director of the company that was having some financial issues said that if somebody comes in to buy a car, I don't care what you do, get their money, either a check, debit card, credit card, I don't care, we need the money in the bank. So the following Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock I get to work and there's a customer already waiting to look at a car. We go out on a test drive, he likes the car. When we get back, everything's going fine, and he says to me, would you take a check? And I said, yes. It turns out this secret shopper had been sent down by the finance company to make sure that I offered him a finance product, which I didn't. Now, obviously, it was part of my job to try and sell finance, but the reason I didn't was because in the back of my head was the director saying, get the money in the bank, I don't care how it comes. The outcome of this was that the finance company wrote a letter to my employer saying that because I hadn't offered the product, they should consider dismissing me from my job. Now, of course, I argued with my employer and said, you told me, however it happens, get the money in the bank. And that's what I was trying to do. And of course, my employer didn't sack me because they agreed that's what they told me to do. But you can see how the pressure was put on so hard by the finance companies to make sure that finance product and that PPI was being sold. Really underhand tactics, in my opinion. Not only did the finance companies have a hold of the customer and the salesperson, but they also had a massive hold over the dealership. They would offer what was called a stocking loan. Effectively, they would say to the garage or to the dealership, we will give you, say, £100,000 to go and buy a stock of vehicles 3 to 4 years old, and you can have £100,000 interest free for 30, 60, 90 days, depending on the terms. But in order to do that, you have to sell a certain amount of finance with PPI. So the incentive was there for the dealerships because they could effectively get £100,000 interest free for 30, 60 or 90 days to buy stock. So therefore they were pushing and pushing and pushing to make sure that every salesperson was selling as much finance as possible with as much PPI as possible. So the finance companies had everybody by the short and curlies: the customer, the salespeople, the dealerships. So you won't be surprised to know by this point I'd had enough. I got out of the motor trade and I decided it was time to change careers, which I did. And you also won't be surprised to know that as time's gone on and I've seen these finance companies and banks have to pay back these extraordinary amounts of money to people, it really did put a smile on my face. Karma's a bitch. But the finance companies are still at it, and they're still doing various things to try and make sure people get into debt, because debt is worth a lot of money to them. For example, I made a purchase online last week from an online catalogue company for something that I needed that was relatively expensive, and I found it to be cheapest with that company. I bought it, I paid for it with my own money from my debit card, and 2 days later I got a phone call from that company asking me if I'd like to finance it. And I said, no, I've paid for it, why would I want finance? Well, you can spread the cost over the course of 2 years. Well, I don't need to, I've paid for it, I've got some savings, so I've bought it. Yes, but you could spread the cost and keep that money in your bank account, couldn't you? At 44% APR. No thanks. As always, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, then please consider giving me a subscribe, and I'll see you again.